I'm Lawrence McPherson. I'm here with you since Sneak Peek. I am here with Darin Scott, a 25-year veteran in Hollywood, and he's here in Houston, Texas, here promoting his director's workshop. If I could ask you, do you feel any pressure as an African-American filmmaker to make African-American films? And if you do you feel that you need to make them in the stereotypical format, portraying African-Americans, or something completely different?
Well, you know, something, I've made films that are mainly black films, and I've made films that aren't mainly black films. And when I say that, I'm talking about the composition of the cast my whole career. And basically, I want to tell good stories, and I'm going to go for the type of cast that tells that story the best. You know, I made a lot of you know, black films that are very well remembered, stuff like Menace to Society.
All I'm saying is, survive.
You need to be glad that you graduated from high school and that you're alive at 18, and you need to do something with yourself before you end up like he did.
Tales from the Hood.
Let's roll, man. In this neighborhood is a house where souls never rest. You're invited to share their secrets.
I've been waiting for you boys.
Not so long ago, Waist Deep.
My son!
Dad!
Julia!
Sprung.
Got any babies?
No.
Wives?
No. Fat moms? Booger Bear in the family tree?
Definitely not.
We're gonna have to take the gloves off now.
I'm talking about some low down,
Nasty.
diabolical.
You just named a number of films. Those are very memorable. Did well for you at the box office, things of that nature. And if I could say one title to you, and we watched it, and I remember watching it before, and I watched the trailer, and we were cracking up. If I could say one title to you, tell me what you think. Fear of a Black Hat.
In today's world, it can be very difficult for the black man who wants to find the proper forum to express his social and political views. See, I wanted to mess with everybody, so I had to find a producer who wasn't afraid of a little controversy. He told me that we didn't have a lot of money, and I'd have to do a lot of the work myself. This is more than a comedy. This film is subversive.
We can't let the white man tell us how to sell to our market. Right, Freesh?
The white man, no good.
It deals with issues that you and I deal with every day, like how the media distorts reality.
The media was trying to say that the people looting was, you know, all lazy and didn't want to work. But I tell you what, you try carrying a leather sofa all the way from like Slauson and Crenshaw down to Pico or Venice or something like that, and then going back for them matching end tables, that's some work for your behind right there.
We deal with race.
I look at people and everybody seems to be the same shade.
You sure it's not the glasses?
We deal with racism.
Are they registered with the state?
State of siege.
We deal with the misconceptions between
Well,
man
Fear of a
and
Black
woman.
Hat is a movie that grew mainly out of my love for a picture called Spinal Tap that was done in the early 80s, a Rob Reiner film, and it was basically a takeoff on rock musicians. And at that time in the early 90s when we did Fear of a Black Hat, you know, it was really the beginnings of the explosion and the mainstreaming of hip-hop and of rap. And we just thought it would be a fantastic idea to do basically a hip-hop Spinal Tap. And that's what we did, and I think it's a really funny film. And it's a funny thing because it's one of my smaller box office performers, but it has a more loyal cult following, not just in the United States, but all over the world. We still get letters from people talking about that movie and how hilarious they think it is.
That's one of the things I wanted to ask you. That was one of the smaller box office numbers. But I wanted to ask you, and you just relate to that, how you actually felt about the film itself. And by it actually having a cult following, as a filmmaker, is that more enjoyable to you to actually have that kind of a following, that kind of effect on people versus having the big numbers at the box office?
Absolutely. And I'll tell you the truth. I have made movies that made tens of $millions at the box office of particular titles, and I mention them to people today, and they're like, which one was that? And they don't even really remember it. It was forgettable. And I've had some other titles that made less than $1 million at the box office, who everybody seems to recognize. I had a cameo in Fear of a Black Hat, and I still get people come up to me in movie theaters and grocery stores saying, weren't you the security guard in Fear of a Black Hat? And I'm like, that's been 20 years. Almost 20 years. I can't believe that you still remember that. But it's the more culty movies that seem to stick with people. You know, Tales from the Hood was a mid-range performer for me. You know, I think it did about $12 million at the box office. It was a moneymaker, but it wasn't a breakout hit. But I would say probably that's my most recognized film by the general public. If I start listing my credits to somebody I just meet on the street and they say, well, what have you done? They'll be like, oh, yeah, Menace to, oh, yeah, I know that. Yeah. Fear of Black, oh, yeah, wait a second, my friend told me that was hilarious. Oh, Tales from the Hood, oh, the shit. They know it. I had a spine doctor who was giving me an epidural because I had a bad disc in my back. And he's putting a needle in my back, and he starts quoting all the dialogue from Tales from the Hood and told me it was his favorite movie. And it made me kind of nervous because that's not even my favorite movie. And I'm like, if that's your favorite movie, I'm not sure I want you putting a needle in my spine.
That's very good insight. We were discussing that before I knew I was going to speak with you, and you know, Fear of a Black Hat, that was hilarious to us, and that was, I'm glad you pointed on that. And as filmmakers and teaching this workshop, do you want to create something that's more memorable, or create something that goes to the box office that does really well? So I'm glad you pointed that out. If I could ask you a couple more questions. Most people, when they think about getting into the film business, they might think, hey, I want to be an actor. You know, I want to be maybe a writer, which is a natural transition, and then just go into directing. Most people actually would skip over producing. Just for the audience that doesn't know that much about filmmaking, could you talk about what the producer's role is? And I know I spoke with you before, and I heard you talk about you're so glad that you actually produced way before you ever directed.
Yeah, because you get an overview, if you're watching, of the whole process. Producers are usually the first person with a project and the last person to leave it, especially if you're a creative producer, and I was a producer who often wrote the things that I was producing. So if you're a creative producer, you often conceived of the whole thing, or you optioned the book, or you bought the script, and for the most part, you've probably been running around with it for 5 or 6 years trying to get it made. And then when it actually is made, it's a thankless job because you have to say no to so many people so many times. People basically hate you, you know, and you're like, and see you as the creative enemy. And it's like, I'm the one who championed this thing for 5 or 6 years. So producing is a tough gig. It's a tough gig because you have all of the stress and very little of the glory. It's not like the days of David O. Selznick anymore. Producers aren't looked at as these great creative entities. Oh, you know, we want very few. Very few. For the most part, it's a director's medium now. One reason I switched to directing. No.
If I could talk to you a little bit about your latest work, you did talk about Femme Fatale, directing 3 episodes on HBO. If I could ask you, and it's something that's in post-production, when is it actually going to be released? Something Wicked.
Really don't know when that's going to be released. It's in the hands of the producers now, who are seem to be having some struggles with what creative direction they want to take.
And if I could just name the lead actress in that, Brittany Murphy.
Yes.
Do you think...
The second lead, the actual lead is Chantel Van Santen, who's now on One Tree Hill. Brilliant young actress who I think is going to be a huge star. So watch out for her and remember her name.
I made a promise to my mom and to myself that I wouldn't be intimate with a guy until I was married.
That's a really tough promise to keep. I'm proud of you.
I just can't believe they're not going to be there on my wedding day. My dad won't be there to walk me down the aisle and give me away, and my mom won't be there to help me pick up.
I guess to go back to Brittany Murphy, does in sitting in your class, I can tell that you have a pretty good rapport, really good rapport with your actors and with your crew. I was going to ask you, how did it affect you hearing the news that actually happened to her, and how do you think that's going to affect the film, the outcome of the film, when people go to watch, if you don't mind me asking?
You know, it's really tragic, and it's really hard to say. It's really hard to say. It's been some time now, you know, some months since her passing, and the public is a funny thing, you know. They have one reaction right after, and then a year or two later, it's a totally different reaction. I enjoyed working with Brittany. She was a super talented young person. It was an incredible tragedy that her life ended as early as it did, and she did some good work in the film. So I would hope that people will still go and check it out and appreciate what's probably going to be the last one of her films to ever be released.
Thank you for answering that question. I know it's probably tough to do. And if I could just ask you, you're here in Houston. There is starting to be a big following indie filmmaking. A lot of students around town working on a lot of short films, a lot of trailers, things of that nature. And I know I spoke with you earlier before, and you said not everyone can make it to Hollywood, to L.A., but there's passionate people, good filmmakers all over. So I just kind of wanted to ask you what put Houston on your map. What made you want to target this city versus, not to say that you're not going to go to Louisiana or New Mexico or anything like that, but what put Houston on the map for you to actually want to come and put on a workshop like this?
Well, to tell you the truth, I became aware of how vibrant the independent film community in Houston is through a relationship with the publishers of Indie Slate magazine, which is an international magazine. It's published 5 countries all over the United States. It's one of the leading magazines for independent filmmakers. And I met Dave and Maureen, who are the editors and publisher of the magazine, some years ago. And they were out of Houston, and they told me, the people here are really passionate about film. And I was like, that's not really a city that's first on your thought process.
Let me guess, you think Houston, we have a problem? NASA, Houston, we all that's.
Yeah, you think of NASA. You think of Austin, where I shot Love and 45, which was Renee Zellweger's, first breakout picture. These days, you think of New Mexico, Louisiana, Georgia. Basically, you think of the states that have robust production incentives. And I think the state of Texas shouldn't allow itself to be ringed by states that have robust production incentives. And if the state of Texas ever came anywhere close to these other states to encouraging production here, things would absolutely just explode, because the passion's here.
Did you hear that, Houston? We do have a problem. We need to get incentives here so that we can start getting the filmmakers here, like Darin Scott. I want to thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. This is an inside look at Houston Sneak Peek. Thank you, Mr. Darin Scott.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.